First of all, congratulations on the weekend. European champions, back-to-back. Absolutely amazing. I don't know if I was up in Edinburgh for the match. I'm sure some of you were maybe there or watched it on television. It was an absolute spectacle. It was one of the best European finals we've seen. On the pitch, they were fantastic. Off the pitch, the whole thing, was carried off extremely well. Just how exciting was it to be part of that whole journey and to be there and to see that?
It was immense. It was from a rugby perspective, it was definitely a better final than the year before. But I think maybe sometimes in rugby we're a little bit impatient because there were some comparables drawn between the Heineken Cup and the EPCR Champions Cup just as far back as last year. And I think 1 year later that competition has evolved fantastically. When you look at the passion around those two semi-finals we had, and most of you probably remember seeing the Clermont-Auvergne fans, they had to put a cordon of security around the media guys trying to do their job pitch side. It was fabulous. It was in every way absolutely terrific, and so great semi-finals this year, and then a final. Very often, as we all know, semis are sometimes better than the final because there's so much at stake in the final. But I thought this year both teams played their hearts out, and it was a real spectacle of rugby. Certainly the Clermont try was one of the all-time greats.
Yeah. It seems to be very tangible, this idea of the players playing for each other. How much of that filters through the rest of the club off the field, and how much of an impact does it have?
Yeah, it's so in 2009, our chairman Nigel Ray recruited Brendan Venter. And Brendan said that our performance on the pitch will be based on a culture in the training ground, but a culture which must also translate all the way through the organisation and the way it's run. So we have a goal which is to be the most hard-working, innovative and caring rugby organisation in the world. And I think when you write those words, people are entitled to question them. But here we are. Brendan came in 2009, so 8 years later, 8 years later, and you look at the results since that culture was implemented in the club. And in the Premiership, we finished in the top 4 in the last 8 years, consistently every year for the last 8 years. And in Europe, we finished semi-finals or beyond for the last 5 years, or 5 times in the last 8 years. So it's definitely hard to separate the two and say that culture doesn't drive on-pitch results. We firmly believe it does, and our core values and our common purpose all firmly behind that culture.
So obviously Heath sees Saracens run out every week during the season, year on year.
Yeah.
You know what you're selling, you know what your business is. You know you're going to fill a stadium or you're going to sell season tickets based around that performance and that team. For you, you're trying to sell something that we only see for a very short window every 4 years. Very, very different
it's very
commercial
different.
position.
It's very different. I think the way in which our partners and to be fair, the way in which the business operates is that we're a star that shines bright, but it's a reference point throughout the season. So if you're a Lion, if you're Mako Vunipola, you are Saracens, England, British and Irish Lions. So you can create a programme to enter into the dialogue of rugby every season. But ultimately, once every 4 years, that star shines incredibly bright. It lights up the sky, and then you can focus in on that tour and that point in time. So absolutely, some partners really focus in on that, that core time, which is, I suppose a 3-month period with the matches taking sort of 6 weeks. But in general, they have 2 parts to their activation program. The first is about developing a relationship between their brand and the Lions brand, and then the second part is the focus on the performance on the field, which comes around the tour.
So your big partners, Standard Life, Canterbury, QBE, Land Rover, Qantas, Gillette, EY, big brands. Is it a challenge given the fact that they get this short window? I know you say you try and activate over the course of the 4 years, but ultimately the one time they do get to shine is just for this small window.
I think, if you look at the sports industry as a whole, there is almost too much content. I think scarcity is actually one of the great appealing factors of the Lions. From a
This is very good, Charlie. This is very good. I'm going to write that down.
But it is.
I like
it
that.
is. But I think you look at it, and actually, every 4 years it comes alive in homes and rugby clubs and sports clubs in the UK and Ireland. But you look at it from a New Zealand perspective, you know, they get to enjoy the Lions once every 12 years. And I tell you what, you go down to New Zealand now, we're not coming for 10 days, 2 weeks. The whole place, every street is dressed from Whangarei down to Invercargill. Invercargill aren't even hosting a game. You know, the whole country is coming alive. It's not about 10 matches, it's about a festival of sport. And I think that's, you know, scarcity is what's driving the brand with, you know, in New Zealand and I think back home, because it is so special that once every 4 years, everyone gets the opportunity of watching and believing that we're going to win. And we get that opportunity again this time.
You know, I go to a lot of rugby matches. I see the crowd. I see the demographic there. It is still heavily dominated by male middle class men. Does that help when it comes, or hinder when it comes to finding those partners? And do you sense a shift in that? Do you see a move in the way that the demographic and the crowd is moving?
You know, I think the mistake we make is we think that Twickenham man is reflective of the whole of rugby, and I don't think that is the case. So we know that 67% of the rugby audience in the UK is male, and you know, but I don't think that's reflective of the whole piece, and I think it's changing fast. So at Saracens, 52% of our audience is male, 48% female. So we're nearly at that 50-50 mark. Let's be honest, we all know who makes the decision in most households. That's us, you know, by the way. Yeah. You know, I think if you don't appeal to young girls to play rugby or follow the sport, that's to your detriment. I do think a generation ago, 10 years ago, a large proportion of rugby's fans were people who once played rugby, and I think that's changed over the last 10 years. I think the game is well broadcast and well produced now, and it's got enough flair and excitement to it. We're not grinding out 6-3 victories anymore. You know, we've just had a season with, I think, 6,300 points scored in the Premiership, 725 tries, and that's, you know, we're in the entertainment business, full stop. So people want to go and watch that sort of thing, and we want them to come not as to white middle-class males to come and watch rugby. We want the family of 4 coming, mum and dad and 2.2 children. That's what makes an exciting audience, and that's what gives your fan base longevity, as mum and dad, you know, may stop coming to the games in their 80s and their children start coming with their children, and you know, it future-proofs the sport. So I don't think the sport is as male and bogged down as Twickenham man may make it look like at times. I think there's far more diversity and breadth to the rugby audience, and I think the shift is changing. And I can remember with great clarity my first ever game, 1986, at Twickenham, and you probably could have put all the ladies in that stadium into a minibus at the end of the game. You know, today when you go to Twickenham, you don't see that, and when you come to Premiership games, it's a wholly different audience dynamic, which is positive.
You know, there's no doubt the sport is male, and so we do attract male brands. But I think it's up to the sport to change, as opposed to the businesses that come and want to partner with the sport. So, you know, it's up to us. So we've got a project at the moment called Learning with the Lions. It's the first time we've ever had a grassroots program. You know, on the whole, we've been, you know, up until this year, we've been completely focused on we are best of best, and we perpetuate that by everything we do. What we've been doing this time around is working with the 4 home unions, bringing together the 4 development directors to actually try and use that philosophy and brand to actually retain people within the game.
You know, when we built the original East Stand 5-6 years ago, we made a commitment to Barnet that we would be good citizens and that we'd put back more than we take out. And I think we've just got our West Stand planning permission because we've delivered on our promise and we've been honourable, and we have given more than we said we would. So it's encouraging, whether it's Monday night Sarries skills clubs with autistic children where their parents are upstairs having a couple of hours of respite, falling asleep, reading a newspaper on a beanbag with a cup of coffee, you know, and that's their only downtime from their children that week, or whether it's the elderly doing alpine walking or yoga or whatever. It's got enormous breadth, something we're massively proud of.
Potentially in the future, hopefully we might see female lions. I think it's very, very important from a personal perspective, not from a business perspective. I'd like to see that happen very quickly, because the opportunity for them to go to Canada. Canada's a big nation in terms of women's rugby. or back to New Zealand, to be fair. But I think there are other opportunities to bring that brand alive. I mean, we will be, the Lions will be watched in 120 countries, or was in 2013 120 countries. There's talk about 200 countries now for this tour. So I think the interest is growing globally. I think that the opportunity for us to tour outside the traditional nations, I don't think it's going to be there, but I think that's because of the global rugby economic environment and rugby schedule, as opposed to any desire from the Lions to go out and play elsewhere.
We wish you all the best of luck when you head down to New Zealand. It's the toughest environment in the world going to play rugby, and 12 years ago we were there, Charlie, and it's hard work, and it will be a challenge, but I think you've got an incredible set of players, a great group, and I'd love to see you get off to a flyer down there. So we wish them all the best of luck, and thank you all very much.